Welcome back to the Tar Heel Illustrated podcast. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and back alongside me, THI publisher Andrew Jones. Andrew, before we jump into some spring football talk, how you doing, man? It's been a while since we've been together on a video.
Well, we are social distancing because we're at least 8 miles apart right now. So we're doing our part. I'm doing great. We haven't done one of these with you yet. You've been involved in all the ones we've done with UNC. You asked a few questions, but by and large, you're kind of observing and you record it and do your thing afterwards. So it's good to actually hook up with Jacob and hammer one of these things out. Actually, we're going to do a few of these.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, first of all, we all know that Carolina didn't have their spring practice. The coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever, all that kind of stopped them from even having any practices during the spring. But in this video, we're going to kind of focus on some parts of the offense. Why I said we didn't get spring football practice, obviously Carolina didn't have it. We did get a lot of access. We got to talk to a lot of coaches, Mac Brown, Phil Longo, Jay Bateman, some players. So we did get a lot of information from the guys. It was good that we were able to get that access with Carolina obviously not being able to practice, AJ. But the first thing I want to kind of touch on is Carolina, the offense. We talked to Phil Longo, a couple weeks ago now, I guess it was, and he talked about Carolina didn't really lose a lot without being able to install the offense. Obviously, having those spring practice reps and having those few weeks of doing that and the spring game would have helped that. But overall, it seemed like Phil Longo said that Carolina didn't really, at least on his offensive side of the ball, he feels like his team really didn't lose a lot without being able to kind of do those installs with some of the younger guys. But it seemed like talking to Coach Longo, he was pretty comfortable with where his offense was, especially when you consider that, Carolina's just returning a ton of guys on that side of the ball next season.
Well, that's exactly why. And I asked him about player-led practices. We'd heard a lot about the player-led practices, what Sam Howell had been doing, and just to kind of understand a little bit more what player-led practices actually means, because there's that period when the season ends before spring football where the coaches can't watch the kids, although the strength and conditioning people, some of them can. And then after spring, up until fall camp, same kind of deal. So they rely very heavily on player-led practices, and it's a lot easier to have a solid, well-run player-led practice when the players, a lot of them know the offense, and then they could teach the younger guys the offense, or the more experienced guys can teach the kids that have been in the program that didn't have as many reps the previous year. They could teach them the offense. So the main thing that I actually took from our conversation with Phil Longo, and we talked to Sam Howell, Mac Brown, et cetera, is that they didn't miss a lot by not having a typical spring practice install, because they essentially already had the install in place. Now, there were a few wrinkles they would have added. They can do that in August. And they missed some of the reps for some of the younger guys, especially someone like Jonathan Adorno, a true freshman who enrolled in January. He was actually running center for a lot of the player-led practices, and they really wanted to get him a lot of reps. They wanted to get Ty Murray a lot more reps. He was the backup last year to Brian Anderson after Polino went down, and there's going to be a battle there at center. So there were certainly some position groups and some players that they wanted to see get the reps. Other guys on the offensive line as well. Austin Richards, looking at Jordan Tucker at right tackle and left tackle. But for the most part, the install isn't really an issue. And it's interesting because in past years covering spring football, for whatever program it was that I was covering, coaches constantly emphasize when they talk to us 3 and 6 and 9 practices into the spring about the install, about the importance of the install. I thought it was really interesting that Phil Longo wasn't the least bit concerned about the install. And that's a really good sign for Carolina, because a lot of programs out there that only had a couple practices before the shutdown or didn't practice at all, they may not be able to hit the ground running in August like the Tar Heels will be able to on offense.
Exactly. And, if this would have happened, we talked about this a little bit off camera and on camera, but if something like this would have happened last season, it would have been, devastating for a program like this with Mac Brown and his new coaching staff coming in, not being able to install anything, not being able to have any, live real practices during the spring. So I guess if you have to look at it at a positive of this situation, you could, as a Carolina, from a Carolina perspective, would be that it didn't happen last season, that it happened this season, and that Carolina is so deep, like you mentioned, on offense and defense, really. But you mentioned this a little bit when you were talking a second ago, but the offensive line. A lot further ahead than they were last year. Obviously, they're going to lose. They lost Nick Foligno, Charlie Heck. Obviously got drafted first for the Tar Heels by the Texans. But you look at who Carolina returns on that offensive line of the ball. Brian Anderson played a ton last year with Foligno getting hurt. Jordan Tucker, Joshua Azudu, Marcus McKeithen, Ed Montilus, just to name a few. Even William Barnes, a guy that came in really highly touted and really hasn't lived up to that billing yet. But I've seen him, for instance, posting a ton of workout videos on Twitter and Instagram. So it seems like he's kind of motivated to maybe earn some playing, maybe live up to that billing that he came in with, AJ. But offensive line-wise, I mean, a lot further ahead than, let's say this time last year, a couple weeks after the spring game and whatnot. It seems like the offensive line's a position group that Carolina's got to be feeling really good about going into this season.
Well, I asked Longo when we spoke with him, the difference between the offensive line now and a year ago. And a year ago, they had no idea what they were dealing with. And they knew Charlie Heck was, but they didn't know how good he could be. And he certainly improved and became an NFL player during the course of the year. And they knew that Polino was solid, and that's before Polino got hurt. And he went down in the first half of the Miami game, and then basically he came back later in the year, but was in a distant reserve role. When they played App State in the fourth game, going into that game, because Charlie Heck, it's the one game he missed, the combined number of starts for the offensive line was 10. And think about it. That was the fourth game of the year, and some of those guys were starting their fourth game. So it was as green could be. That's completely different now. They bring back more than 3,000 snaps from last year on the offensive line. Mac told us a while ago that Austin Richards probably would have run with the first team at left tackle when spring practice was scheduled to start. Of course, they never got on the field. And Phil Longo told us, obviously, Jordan Tucker would get a good look there, too. There's going to be some competition. It's not totally settled right now. But what makes Longo very optimistic and Sam very optimistic and Mac very optimistic is the fact that they have some options. They have some interchangeable parts. They know that Montilus can play both guards. They know that Azudu can play guard and center. He started that game, or guard and tackle, excuse me. He started that game at tackle that Heck missed last year, and he started 6 other games at guard. So a lot of experience, guys that learned from a lot of mistakes, and now they understand. Now they know what they have with this group. And while there are a couple of question marks with some guys that are inexperienced, like Richards and Adorno, and also Ty Murray, they also are very confident that they will get up to snuff. That's the one thing missed about spring, like I said a few minutes ago. Those guys needed reps. The staff needed to see them compete, especially Richards. I think they really wanted to see him in a situation where he was being pushed hard in the spring without having to think about, hey, we got a game in a few weeks. So they're going to have to change that up. And there's a chance that they won't have a traditional fall camp this year. They may get an extra week or two added on. And if that's the case, they can experience that the first couple of weeks before they start to get into more conventional fall camp mode. So they feel great about the line. There's some other guys there too, like William Barnes, who's been around a few years, and Billy Ross, that, is this kind of a make or break year for William Barnes? He's kind of at a fork in the road. I don't know if you could say the same thing for Billy Ross. They do know that with him, they've got a lot of snaps. I think he's played close to 1,000 snaps in his career. So they have options. They have depth. If somebody goes down, I think they have enough interchangeable parts that they're going to be able to make up for it pretty quickly. And that has them feeling really good about what they have moving forward, especially protecting Sam. Sam got sacked a lot last year. He got hit a lot last year. It's amazing that he didn't go down, especially when he was the only scholarship quarterback on the field for most of the season. So I think they feel real good, Jacob, and Carolina fans should too. The offensive line is young, but it's in outstanding shape, and it could be one of the best groups they've had in a while there.
Yeah, that was a perfect segue at the end of there, right there, because the last thing I really want to touch on is the quarterback room. You talked about it last year. I mean, Carolina just had no depth there. Jace Ruder went down in, what was the Appalachian State game? He went down in on one play pretty much missed the remainder of the season. So a true freshman and Vincent Amendola had to step in, a local guy from Raleigh, but a guy that wasn't highly recruited, a guy that was to come in and see significant reps, was kind of supposed to be your third string, maybe fourth string guy, ends up being your backup. And there's nobody else back there. Now look at the quarterback room. You got Sam Howell, who had an awesome All-American true freshman season for the Tar Heels last year. I've written a couple of stories on him. We talked to him probably about a month ago now, but about how he's been studying Joe Burrow tape. how he's been watching a lot of NFL film, trying to improve his game during the offseason. And then you get Jace Ruder back, a guy that was in, this time, basically this time last year, was in the thick of a quarterback battle with Sam Howell and kind of vying for that starting spot. But Jace Ruder comes back in the fold. And not only does that allow, Sam Howell to run more, like you mentioned, but it allows the offense to open up a little bit. Maybe you see Jace Ruder a little bit more in there and a little bit more involved. And then you consider the fact that you got Jacoby Criswell as well, a true freshman coming in, and even Jefferson Boaz. We don't necessarily know where he's going to fit in yet. He's a guy who can play multiple positions, but obviously had a campaign last year as a senior in high school, winning a state championship as a starting quarterback. So, that quarterback room right now, AJ, you got Sam Howell first and foremost, who a lot of people are talking about potentially being a Heisman candidate in the next couple of seasons. And then you got some depth back there too. So that's another position you got to be feeling really good about, especially when you consider that Sam Howell did it all last year with a relatively young offensive line. Now he's got guys in front of him with another year of experience. That quarterback room's got to be feeling good going into next season if everybody can stay healthy.
There were a couple of road games last year where I took pictures during warm-up, sitting up at the press box. Once they come out and they break up in their individual position groupings, one of the first things the quarterbacks do with their helmets off is they take snaps from the centers, shotgun snaps. And you'd have this first-string center be paired up with the first-string quarterback. The 2 would be with the 2, the 3 with the 3, and the 4 with the 4. Usually you got like 4 guys on the road that would be in uniform. Well, there was Brian Anderson snapping to Sam, and then there was whoever was his backup that week snapping to Vincent Amendola. Okay. And then there were 2 centers snapping to student managers or assistant coaches because there were only 2 quarterbacks in uniform, and Sam was the only one on scholarship. Amendola was a true freshman walk-on, and he was the backup. They were 1 play away from having to go with him. It's totally different now. You're right about Jace. If you go back to the Wake Forest game, there was a package for him in that game. He actually had a 25-yard run, I believe, in that game, or a 20-yard run. So you got a little glimpse of what they thought, how they thought they might be able to use him. They were not a great red zone offensive team last year, especially on the run. They only finished like 10 rushing touchdowns on the year. Half of those came in the last couple of games. Having a guy like Ruder that you could get the ball to inside the red zone, inside the 10, who could run because he's bigger, stronger than Sam, is a wrinkle other teams at the very least have to prepare for. But Jace is more than that. Jace was a 4-star quarterback. He was offered by a lot of big-time programs. He's a kid that can throw the ball, that if he just stays healthy and something happens to Sam, I think the staff is very confident with what they would have in Jace Ruder. Criswell, we saw him at the Showtime camp last year, and the thing that stood out about him, other than the fact that he's got a nice arm and just looks like a dude who's in command out there, is he was in command. He was by far the leader at that camp. He kind of reminded me a little bit of Marquise Williams with a big personality and the kind of guy that kids gravitate around. That's part of the deal for being a quarterback. And that was one of the things that Sam had to work on last year because it comes more naturally to some guys than other guys. So Criswell certainly enhances that room. And what you said about Boaz, I think, is interesting. Our understanding is he's going to get a look at quarterback first. Dina King will tell you how good he was in high school, set all kinds of records. The kid could spin it. He could definitely play quarterback, but he could also do other things. He's a great athlete, so he may not stay at quarterback, or maybe he does. Bottom line is that room is in so much better shape now than it was a year ago. I think Sam would be better. You wrote a piece about his studying Burrow's work at LSU last year, and I think you also wrote one about him studying NFL film. And the purpose of that was he couldn't get on the field this spring in a team situation, but Longo worked with him on NFL film so he could learn to understand how things are disguised. That's the next step for him. He wants to be an NFL quarterback down the road, but he maybe had some issues with recognizing disguised defenses and that kind of thing. So that's the next step for Sam, and it's more mental because the physical stuff, he can handle that. But if he could pick it up mentally and then apply that to the field, he'll be an even better player, and they have a lot of confidence that took place this year. Quarterback is in much better shape than it was a year ago, provided everybody stays healthy.
Yeah, for sure, AJ. I think there's, like I said, Carolina, no practices for them this spring, which obviously hurts you. You can't sugarcoat that. You would like to have those practices, but looking at the offense, there's just a lot of positives to take into next season, and not having spring practice I don't think is going to hurt them as much as it could have. And this was a younger team, a team that had a lot of freshmen coming in that didn't return a lot of guys. But, I mean, on the offensive side of the ball in particular, AJ, I mean, this team's looking pretty set going into next season. And if last year was any indication, Carolina should have a really good season on offense this year when you look at all the guys they got coming back.
And we didn't even talk about the 2,000-yard receivers that are coming back. We didn't talk about the 1,000-yard running back and the near 1,000-yard running back that's back. We didn't talk about a former four-star guy, tight end, who's back, starter, fifth-year senior, Garrett Wilson. So offense is in fantastic shape. There's depth there. I can't wait to see guys like Josh Henderson get the ball in more competitive situations than some of the cleanup stuff he had last year. Carolina's offense should be in very, very good shape. They should be better in the red zone. They should protect Sam better, have more depth, better composition up front. And I really think that the offense has a chance to be more consistently like what people saw in the NC State and Temple games.
Absolutely. There's a lot of positives for the offense going into the 2020 season. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like he said in the beginning of this video, we're going to be doing a few of these videos, looking at the defense, looking at the offense in this one, and doing some other things as well, guys. So thanks for tuning in. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, share this video if you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.